How we doing tonight? IB Nation Sports Talk up and running, and it's mailbag night.
That's right.
He's Vince D'Addario. I'm Sean Stiers. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
You're obviously you're on the road. Got a
I
game
am.
tonight.
Another hotel, another state. I am in Evanston, Illinois for Notre Dame and Northwestern Little Women's basketball action. 9:00 Eastern time. Late start. I mean, but I guess the only upside is because it's a later start, I get to be with you guys doing the show tonight.
So on that end of it, I'm very happy that it's an early start. On the other end of it,
right?
I mean, that's 9:00 start is rough, man.
I know.
How would you like to be Duke in Kansas from last night? Yeah, you're following a double overtime.
I tried to stay awake as a Kansas alum, and I fell asleep.
I was wondering if you watched that game because
I kept trying, and it's like I'm sitting there, and it's like, okay, this game is coming down to the wire. Overtime, and then of course, double overtime, and I'm like, are you kidding? Come on! It was just like the Cowboys game on Sunday, with when the Vikings Bills before it went to overtime that we were talking about.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Well, it is mailbag night, so get in your questions. We've got a few of them in the chat going already. By the way, I talked to Dan Rubin from bceagles.com. Got it posted up on YouTube, and of course, we'll have it on Saturday. Talked a lot about Phil Jurkovec, of course, and a little bit about John McNulty, the former Notre Dame tight ends coach as well, who's their offensive coordinator first season out there. So
did my boy George Takis come up?
You know what? I forgot to bring up George Takis, unfortunately. I know.
I love me some George Takis. I think he'd be having a heck of a year for Notre Dame. And he'd still be second fiddle behind Michael Mayer, obviously. And I know he wanted to be tight end number one. I have no problem with that.
But you know what? If he was here, I probably wouldn't be complaining about all these 13 personnel sets all the time.
Just saying.
With the extra blocker, right? Like George can block.
Yes, he can.
That's for sure. Hey, hit that like button if you would right now. We're only going to be here. I mean, it is going to be lightning quick tonight. I got to be out. I've got a hard out at 7:00 Eastern time tonight because the bus is leaving at 7:15. So I got to get all my stuff packed. Like my bags are packed, but the computer, the microphone, all this stuff, I've got to get it put away so I can get out the door.
You guys are going to leave straight from the arena to come back home, right?
Yes. If it doesn't snow too badly, because is it? What's the snow like there right now?
It was snowing, dusting at this point. It's supposed to snow until midnight, and then it's supposed to stop.
Yeah. So we're probably going to be making our way home, but it's going to be late. We're not going to finish until after 11:00 Eastern time anyway. So it's going to be a late night creeping back in on the bus.
Yeah, that's going to be brutal
from Chicagoland. All right. We'll get those questions in.
Yeah.
Remind everybody to get their questions in if you would there, Vince.
I'm going to put it in here.
Got a couple of them. Let's start with Brent's question about Brandon Joseph and J.D. Bertrand. It sounded like J.D. Now, when this came up Monday at the press conference, J.D. was going to practice. He did practice Sunday with the team. And it sounded like as long as everything went okay this week, he's going to be playing Saturday. That's one that we'll find out probably tomorrow in the Zoom. And Brandon Joseph as well, we'll find out when we do the noon Zoom with Marcus Freeman. So we'll be able to tell you, more definitively on tomorrow's show. But Joseph is high ankle sprain.
Yeah.
And high ankle sprains are you just never know. Like I've never had a high ankle. I've had your traditional like sprained ankle, turn the ankle, but never a high ankle. And they say that the high ankles are way worse than a regular ankle. So.
Yeah, and it takes longer. And those kinds of injuries, you just need to be off of them. Again, this is a game where you can get by without having Brandon Joseph, I would imagine, and still be okay. You could get by not having J.D. Bertrand and probably still be okay. They won't be as missed as they were last week against Navy because they probably would have been two of your leading tacklers when it was all said and done. I mean, the combination of Xavier Watts and Brandon Joseph at safety, and then you insert JD Bertrand at linebacker. And I'm telling you, the Navy offense would have been neutralized. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't have gotten anything, but they would have been neutralized. I mean, I know that it's just one or two guys, but if you don't have that force on the inside at both levels, you're in trouble. And that's what we saw.
I mean, safeties and middle linebackers, those are typically where the tackles go against the option. You know?
And Kurt Hinish obviously was a dude in the middle at the front level in the last couple of years. I mean, he always dominated when they played Navy, and he didn't really have anybody dominate at that front level, right? So yeah, I mean, it is going to be great to have those guys back. Boston College is a bit of a mishmash, so you don't need them. I want them back though for USC and everything that they bring to the table offensively.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Especially USC. You know, I'm not going to take this game for granted, because any Notre Dame game that we have taken for granted, for the most part, it's like it comes back to bite you. So don't take it for granted. I mean, they need as many healthy, really good players as possible. They definitely missed JD Bertrand last week, but like, this is a BC team that does not run the ball well. And they've just been kind of a mishmash. And Lance wants to know, he says, I know we think Foskey will get the record this week. How improved is BC's O-line now, with this being their third or fourth game in a row with the same lineup?
No, they're still pretty bad. And I know that was kind of the explanation for Notre Dame, and they needed some time to gel and all that. Ain't no gelling gonna do nothing with Boston College. I mean, they're just not a very good offensive line. They're just not. And that's one of the reasons that Phil Dracovic is nursing about every injury that you could possibly have.
Phil Dracovic has been sacked 25 times this season. And Moorhead, the backup, has been sacked 14 times.
Oh, my goodness.
That's 39 sacks. That's like they're working, like NFL quarterbacks, like a bad offensive line will get sacked like 60 plus times. Like they're working on in 10 games, like what, the pace of an NFL season almost. That is a lot, especially like when you consider the mobility that Phil Dracovic has. But, I guess the other part of that too is like the injuries that he's gone through the last couple of years aren't just about the offensive line, but he's a running quarterback as well, just like Tyler Buckner was.
And he's in concussion protocol, I believe, now. And I don't know that it's been definitively that he's in or out for this coming week, but Jeff Hafley said if he's healthy, he's playing.
Yeah.
And so we shall see what happens. I mean,
I expect him to go. I don't know if he'll finish just based on, you know what I mean? Like everything that we've seen.
Yeah.
And, again, I talked to Dan Rubin in the BC interview today. And again, it's up both on the podcast and YouTube. And we spent a lot of time talking about Phil Dracovic, and he detailed a lot of, things that have happened with Phil. But this is also, he has, even when Phil was healthy, this, like early in the season, for example, he was not lighting the world on fire.
This is not a great year for him.
They were putting out, I can't remember who it was, but there were all these, it was like basically quarterback ratings for all the quarterbacks in the country. And Phil was at the bad end of the spectrum, basically.
It's not good.
So, but, does the offensive line play into that? Of course it does.
Sure.
Should they be a little bit better? It sounds like, talking to Dan today, he thinks that this line is showing, a little bit of a pulse, signs of improvement, but it's still an offensive line that's given up 39 sacks. So,
I mean, 4 sacks a game.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
sacks.
And people are talking about Isaiah Foskey and getting the record and all. If he doesn't get the record this week, I mean, he'll have a great shot at getting it next week, to be honest. I mean, if we're being honest, there's going to be a heck of a lot of drop back opportunities against USC for him to get the record there too. So I feel confident that he's going to get it at some point. I just have a feeling it's probably going to come this week as opposed to next.
Caleb Williams gets it out quick, though, man. Like that guy.
He does.
He's got a trigger.
No doubt about it.
For sure. I think he should be able to get it this week. But, again, against a sieve of a line. But, other guys are going to have opportunities too. And sometimes those other guys, when they get the pressure, takes away Foskey's opportunities or
No
whoever's
doubt.
opportunities.
No doubt about it.
All right. Stymie wants to know if it's a snowy Saturday, do we see 300 plus rushing yards?
Is it possible? Sure. Plausible? Probable? Probably not. And I don't believe it's going to be snowy. It's just going to be cold.
Yeah.
There's going to be obviously that's a difference. It's going to be
most of the snow is going to happen like in the next 24 hours.
Yeah,
and then
it's going to happen
like you might see remnants of some snow. You might see some snowballs.
Yes. But yeah, I don't think you're going to see snow on new snow falling from the sky on Saturday. And I don't honestly think it's going to snow on Friday either. So you're going to have plenty of time to get things cleaned up. And if that's not going to be an issue with the game, it's going to be cold. It's like a high of 27 on Saturday. So it's going to be cold. So that's going to be more of an issue than anything else. But you can throw the ball when it's cold and you can run the ball when it's cold. So I don't know that the weather is really going to affect a whole lot. I don't see 300 rushing yards. That's not something that I would count on. If I'm being honest, I think they're going to throw the ball. I think they're going to run the ball. They're going to do what they've been doing. And they darn well better execute better than they did in the second half of the game this past week.
We're going to try to predict what Notre Dame's offense is going to do. I mean, I might as well be throwing money down the drain like you've done on all those double-digit, times that Notre Dame has been favored.
Not wrong
this season. It's very hard to predict. They'll run the offense. I don't think that they want, Drew Pine necessarily just to be a handoff machine. And, they need to find offensive balance throughout the game. This is a game where Boston College is going to come in. They're going to be, you're going to have those, sort of undersized, chippy guys, chip on their shoulders and the whole thing, just like with Navy. And there's going to be a lot of that because this is a huge rivalry game for Boston College. This is it. Again, like talking to Mr. Rubin today, that's the thing that we finished up talking about with the rivalry. This is Boston College's rival. Boston. Sure. Boston is pretty much, it might even be, it might even favor Notre Dame in terms of Notre Dame fans in Boston. I was going to say 50-50, it might even favor Notre Dame, because obviously BC, it's a college in a big market, so there are a ton of Notre Dame fans there, and we all know about the backup school and all that kind of stuff. So Notre Dame needs to kind of get its mind right going into this game in order to get its offense on the right foot. I think that's a big part of it.
No, I think that's a really, really solid point, and it's definitely a little brother, big brother, type of mentality, like that kind of a thing. It's definitely a bigger rivalry to Boston College than it is to Notre Dame. I mean, that's just a fact.
Right.
But Notre Dame needs to get their head around the fact that they need to win this game, and they need to win it decisively, in my opinion, to have some good vibes going into USC.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at what the
real rival, right? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, you can say that BC is a rival. I think there's a trophy at stake. I'm not 100% sure on that, but just because there's a trophy doesn't make it a rivalry. Okay. There's a local rivalry here between two of the high schools, and it's been a one-sided rivalry for quite some time. You know what I mean? And it's not a rivalry. I'm sorry. So this is not a rivalry game. This is a big game because it's senior day, and you want to beat Boston.
It's still a rivalry game for one side, though, and that's
fair.
That's what concerns me. That's what concerns me because I don't think there are enough Notre Dame guys who are going to be in that frame of mind when they think about Boston College. It is a rivalry for BC, and that's part of what's made this game so dangerous over the years. Even though Notre Dame has won more times when they played Boston College in recent years, it's still what makes it dangerous. Is it's a big rivalry to one side, even if it's not to the other so much.
I starred this one, Sean. I'll let you read it, but I starred this one because I wanted to talk about it.
Okay. So Jason says we were smart to have the Southern guys and Cali guys on their visits before the super cold hit.
I mean, the visits were 2 weeks ago in November. You plan those months in advance.
Could have still been cold.
There was no guarantee that it was going to be a beautiful day on November 5th. No guarantee.
And that was about as nice a day as you could
Oh,
ask for.
no doubt about it. We don't get those kinds of days around here. It worked out very, very well that was the case. But I don't know that I can give credit that Notre Dame was smart to do this because they were going to do it on that day regardless.
That was
right?
actually the windy day, though, too, wasn't it? So, I mean, it was
windy. Yeah, it was windy.
It was
but
it was actually better weather 2 days before, but it was windy
True.
and a little bit chilly. But yeah,
still,
it's not going to be snowy. That's for sure.
I can't give Notre Dame credit for that. You can give Mother Nature credit for that, but
I think they just planted around here the primetime games, and that's when we want as many of the big guys in as possible.
Right.
When they play those night games. So they can put on the light show and
they can, basically woo them all day, and leading up to the game because there were events all day long for those guys, and then it leads up to the game, and obviously Notre Dame took care of business when they needed to, so it ended up really good.
Vince, were you doing the college football playoff show last night?
I was not. It was very late because they had to wait for the double overtime game.
I know.
And I'm
glad I wasn't waiting to do a live show when there was a double overtime basketball.
I felt bad for the guys because they started the show and there was nothing to talk about. So they were just kind of doing a mailbag and kind of shooting the bull and waiting for the show to start. And it was
do a little basketball play-by-play.
It was brutal.
Tyler wants to know any thoughts of the rankings from last night?
Yeah, I still think Kansas State is way too overhyped. I don't think they belong. I mean, they shot up like 4 or 5 spots from last week, and they still haven't beat a ranked team. I don't know how that's possible. So they're the highest ranked 3-loss team at the moment. So that is a bit baffling. As far as the top of it, which is what people care about, obviously the 4 undefeated teams are 1, 2, 3, 4. That obviously makes sense. I don't think LSU is 7 good, right? I think that's where they're at if I'm doing it off the top of my head. Or maybe USC is 7. I'm sorry. USC is 7. LSU is 6. I honestly think USC should be higher than LSU based on the losses, right? But, I think that's nitpicking at this point. I mean, it's fine for what it is at the moment. There's always things that you can be upset about. There was one huge riser. Who was it in the Pac-12? Jumped like from 25 all the way up to
Washington because of the win over Oregon. They moved up 8 spots to number 17.
You want to talk about a move? Holy cow! Not appropriate. Like they should not have jumped that far because of one win. And then Penn State's way too high. I mean, Penn State's way too high.
Yeah, I'll correct you on Kansas State because they have beaten both Oklahoma schools. Who are both Oklahoma was still ranked in the top 10 when Kansas State beat them. Actually, it actually got them ranked, in the human poll, whatever polls, AP and coaches poll after that. And they beat Oklahoma State as well. But, they've lost to TCU. They've lost.
None of them
Texas.
are ranked anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. They were ranked when they beat them, but they're not.
Sure.
They're not.
Sure.
Oklahoma State is still currently
Notre Dame's
ranked,
not getting credit for beating Syracuse at this point because they're not ranked anymore.
Right.
They're not getting credit for beating BYU because they're not ranked anymore.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's where I'm at.
I guess my biggest thought is LSU sitting there at number 6, and 1 through 5 all stayed the same, and then that next group, LSU, USC, Alabama, Clemson, all moved up 1 because you had Oregon.
They dropped out,
dropping 6 spots because of that loss to Washington. Why Oregon is still ahead of North Carolina right now, not really sure about that. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can say that they played a little bit tougher schedule, but LSU sitting there at number 6. Again, we know either Ohio State or Michigan, one of the two is going to lose.
Yeah.
And LSU, it's still a big if, but if they run the table and win that SEC championship, I think they're going to be the first 2-loss team to make the playoff.
I don't see it.
I know it kills
their
you.
losses are too bad.
But they're sitting there at number 6.
I know.
They're sitting there at number 6. They're saying they're already justifying them. They're getting us ready for it.
The committee is putting them in position to do that. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But that would be a travesty.
Now, the other thing is, though, there are, it's not just, because they're at number 6, there is still the matter of TCU as well. And if TCU runs the table, they're going to make it. We know that
Absolutely.
Ohio State, Michigan is going to make it.
The winner
and
of
it looks
that
like
game makes
Tennessee's
it.
probably going to make it unless they screw the pooch. So
Yeah, right. So I mean, there's definitely going to be. Wow, I would never slap Sean. Sean's not a Kansas State fan. He's a Kansas fan. Come on, people.
that's right. Kansas State is my rival. It is
Yeah.
not my school. I'm just giving them proper credit, just to make sure. I have to hear from my dad. It's my dad is one of these. My sister went to Kansas State. I
Yeah.
went to Kansas.
He's got the
And
split.
my dad didn't go to either. So he's one of these. Well, I pull for Kansas State football and Kansas basketball. One of those guys.
One of those.
So,
yeah. I
Ride
hear
the
you.
winner.
I hear you.
That's right.
I would never talk trash about Kansas or the Cowboys in Sean's presence.
Right.
I know better.
Right. All right, Nick, what are your thoughts? Better for Notre Dame if UCLA slows down USC or if it's a shootout?
It's not better for Notre Dame if UCLA does anything positive against USC because UCLA already they screwed it up last week by losing.
Yeah.
So now they've dropped, right? And a loss to UCLA does Notre Dame no good at all, right? You want USC to win. You want them to win big because if you want to use the transitive property, right? If Notre Dame beats USC and then, USC blew out UCLA, then that just takes the Pac-12 just out of the mix as far as being above Notre Dame, right? So you want USC to just obliterate UCLA at this point.
Do you want them to have something to play for, or is it better if they're, eliminated potentially from the college football playoff mix if they were to lose to UCLA?
I want USC
because I was thinking, I was kind of thinking along the lines, that you were thinking. Like you don't want a wounded animal going in there and, kind of, like they're coming off UCLA and now, maybe it ticks them off a little bit more and they're taking on Notre Dame. But at the same time, if they beat UCLA, they've still got something to play for because they're a couple wins potentially from getting into the playoff themselves if they run the table.
If they lose to UCLA, then that game doesn't mean quite as much on a national stage for Notre Dame. Now, in a vacuum, Notre Dame USC is always big to me. I always want to beat USC. So Sid Irish is like, I always want USC to lose. I get it. I always do as well.
Right.
But at this point, I want them to win because I want Notre Dame to knock them off their pedestal and knock them out of any possibility of being in the college football playoff. Because if they beat Notre Dame and then they go on to win the Pac-12, and we're going to talk about that in rapid fire.
Yes.
I've got something to say about that. But like Notre Dame, I want to knock them off their pedestal. I want Notre Dame to be the ones to do that because then that'll raise Notre Dame's stock even more, right? Because if you beat a 2-loss USC team,
sure, yeah. So from Notre
bump
Dame's
you up as
perspective,
much.
yeah, it would mean more. Yeah, for sure. Tom says he's seen both USC and UCLA play multiple times this year. UCLA,
I agree
more
with
physical for a change, and I would agree with that as well. And that's why, I think Notre Dame has a pretty good shot in that game because of the physicality.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And it would not in any way surprise me if USC loses to UCLA, by the way. I just want to put that out there.
Oh, I know.
I frankly think that UCLA is a better overall team top to bottom, right? I think USC has a better offense, but I think UCLA is better top to bottom. So they could win. I mean, they could absolutely win that game. Ooh. I just don't want to see it.
I love this. It's a 7:00 kickoff as well. So we can get done, get back home, have a couple pops, and watch a little bit of that game Saturday night.
Oh, that's a good call. That's a good call.
Now, I don't know. I'll let Rob has a question basically about with all the speed and talent coming in next year, in the 2023 recruiting class on defense, do you see more aggressive style, multi-formations, or traditional style? What do you think about that?
Well, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth on this, and I'm not directing this at you, Rob, specifically, but if you're bringing in all this speed and talent, they're all going to be freshmen. You can't throw an NFL playbook at freshmen. That's not going to work, right? You can trigger them, you can do certain things with them, etc. And by the way, they're not all going to start either. So, this recruiting class, this recruiting class isn't your new defense. Like, you're going to have plenty of guys that are starting now. that are going to continue to start. So there's going to be maybe one or two guys. Peyton Bowen obviously has an opportunity to get some significant minutes at safety. I would agree with that. But other than that, I don't know that you're going to see a ton of the new guys in massive roles. So, no, I don't think the defense is going to change a whole lot right away. Now, eventually, maybe, but not as freshmen. No, I don't see that.
Yeah. I concur, because you can have all the speed and talent and athleticism that you want, but you still have to absorb the playbook. And
right.
It's
and that's asking a lot of these freshmen coming in. I mean,
right.
and there's a lot of talent sitting on the bench right now. I mean, we would all agree we want to see more Prince Colley. We want to see more Jalen Sneed. We want to see more Junior Tuihalamaka. I mean, there's guys that we need to see as well.
What was interesting as well is Marcus Freeman was asked about Jalen Sneed and, him getting in there against Navy last week. And it was basically precipitated by the fact that JD Bertrand was out. But what the interesting thing that Marcus Freeman said was even before Bertrand got hurt, Sneed had moved up to the depth chart. He had made his way into the 2 deep. So, so that's really good news for one. But we're also in this point now where 4 games left as of last week, 3 regular season games and a bowl game. So we're probably going to see
your whole roster's
I think we're going to see a lot more of Jalen Sneed,
right?
Like at the very least on a bunch of special teams,
right? And that's why you saw Jabron Payne back there returning kicks,
and him as well. He brought up him as well as the off kickoff returner, and so I think that's pretty, especially like Payne back there along with Tyree on kickoff return. There's some pretty good potential.
Absolutely,
like to see him get the ball in his hands once. And see
I would not be upset if that was the case.
Nope,
that'd be fun.
Irish in Ohio, can we beat BC before we start all the USC talk?
That's fair.
I mean, it is.
That's a fair statement. Okay, that is a fair, absolutely fair statement. Yep, that's what I'll say. It's a fair statement, man. I get it. After this year, gosh, who knows?
Here's a good question. Jeff Brown, if Minchie commits and assuming a healthy Tyler Buckner is back, are they still going to the portal for a quarterback? If it's to get a Jack Cohn type, I say pass. He was slightly above average, benefited from a weak schedule.
Yes, they are going to still look at the portal, regardless of what Kenny Minchie does. And his name is Kenny, by the way, for those in the local media. But they are still going to look at the portal. Yeah, there's no question about that.
It was my shade throw at you.
Yeah, I love it too. But no, they're going to look at the portal, and I think they're going to bring somebody in. And I know that Brian has not shared it with me, but I know that there are names out there of people that they think are going to be in the portal. And so there's guys that Notre Dame will target in the portal. So yes, they are going to the portal regardless. And but it's not going to be a situation where they bring them in to start. They're going to bring them in to compete.
Still have to compete for the job. And
everybody's going to compete.
Again, it goes back to last year, and could have had what's his name? The
kid at Pitt. I mean, not Pitt. West Virginia.
West Virginia. Yeah. He wanted to come here, but they told him he had to compete for the job. They weren't just going to hand him the job.
He wanted guarantees, and I'm happy that they didn't.
And I'm behind that all the way. Especially if he's someone like you can look at all the film you want, and you at least have a more experienced guy than you have just a high school kid coming off the street. It wasn't Slovis; it was the other one, the one that came from Georgia, right?
Yeah.
What was his name?
He reclassified.
JT Daniels. Thanks, Anthony. There you go. JT Daniels. Boom. There it is.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Slovis is the one at Pittsburgh. Daniels is the one at West Virginia.
I said Pitt originally, and I retracted.
Right. But I was thinking the same thing. I couldn't, because they played right off the bat early this season, and that's the last time I really saw him play. But in any case, you're going to have a more experienced quarterback coming in the door, but you still have 2 guys you recruited. One who's going to end up starting. What's it going to be by the time it's all said and done? Like 13 games or something, or 12 games, I guess, right? No,
he started 3. Yeah, so three game 3 on, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It'll be like 11 games this year,
right? And then you've got Tyler Buckner, who of course was supposed to be the quarterback and all that. Yeah. So like you bring in a guy, but you don't make him any promises. He's got to earn it just like everybody else.
Yep.
I've got no problem with that. Will Steve Angeli be ready next year to be a backup?
It's going to be a 4 or 5 way battle for the starting quarterback position, and everything will shake out the way it needs to shake out. I mean, it's very difficult to give 5 guys equal reps. And so you'll probably see, Kenny Minchie not get as many, right? But in the spring, you're going to have 5 guys, right? I mean, if they bring in a transfer quarterback, I would assume they're going to bring him in the spring. Okay.
Right.
So you're going to have 5 guys getting reps in the spring, 6 if you count RP3, which I mean, just saying he's on the roster. But they're all going to get reps. And I mean, things will shake out, I think, quickly, as far as, who's actually competing for the starting position. But yeah, look, Angeli could be he's the backup this year. He could be the backup. No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I agree. It's going to be, I think the spring's going to be really interesting. We're going to have all eyes.
It's going to be, it's going to be a very interesting spring. I will say that because like I said, there could be 6 quarterbacks on the roster. 6. Notre Dame hasn't had that in a long time.
Yeah. I was looking, I thought I saw a comment in here and it's kind of slipped by me that I can't find now. Maybe that's it. I don't know. All right. Did you see any other comments, Vince?
Not comments per se.
Or questions, I guess.
I mean, there were a couple in there. Some were recruiting based.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. There was one. Which one was it? I've been trying to keep an eye out, but
there was one I was about to start earlier, and then I think it slipped right by me.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what. Oh, Jason is asking are you guys pretty confident that Tommy will be back and not take an NFL opportunity?
If I was a betting man, I would say that he will probably be back. The only thing he leaves Notre Dame for is an offensive coordinator position in the NFL.
You don't think he'd go be a quarterback coach first?
I don't. I think
that's
go be a
that's going to be, well, I mean, if that's the case, I think he's going to be here a while.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Until this offense, like Dan Orlovsky can love him all he wants. And
sure,
Dan Orlovsky, great detail about, NFL offenses and all that kind of stuff. But I just think that there needs to be some more consistency shown at the college level, high consistency shown at the college level before you start talking about making a college guy an NFL coordinator.
Sure.
Because that's still a big jump,
You get no argument. He uses
a lot of NFL concepts. I will say that. He models a lot of his things off NFL concepts.
And there's a lot of NFL people that think that he is the truth. So, I mean, it's definitely.
Who knows, I guess.
I mean,
all it takes is the right guy.
Exactly.
It depends on who he's got the relationship with and
how things shake out with the coaching carousel in the NFL, right?
Right.
Who knows what that's going to look like? But yeah, I think when Tommy Rees leaves Notre Dame to go to the NFL, whenever that is, I think he's going to be a coordinator right away. I think that's the only way he leaves.
All right. D-Hawk wants to know, better future, Orioles or Royals? As of right now, I will go with Orioles, even though I do think Kansas City is going to get a little bit more analytics driven after finally ending the ill-fated Mike Matheny experience. I was not a fan of that from the beginning. Going to have a lot of young guys coming through, and I think that that's kind of. I like the Orioles just based on kind of how they emerged late in the season. That's still a tough division in the AL East. Anthony wants to know my baseball prediction. I don't know, man. I mean, new head coach. I'm going to have to kind of wait and see and
there's new faces,
feel things out. Yeah, a lot of new faces, some turnover on that roster, and they lost some pitching obviously to the transfer portal, but. Well, once the football off season gets here, we'll start investing more time in some other sports as well, whether it's basketball,
Oh, yeah.
baseball, you know.
Don't worry, it's coming.
Whatever.
And there's a men's game on tonight. I'll be watching that.
Right.
And I'll also be watching the women's game. I'm going to do the combo
Get the split
action because it's snowing outside. No reason to go out. Basketball. That's what I'm going to be doing. So,
all right. We're going to start running short of time here pretty quick, Vince.
Of course we are. I want to get to one question here.
Okay, do it quick.
Yep. Any advice for a new dad that wants his son to grow up a Notre Dame fan, even though the entire family is USC fans? They are already buying SC clothes for him.
I would say, now I don't know where you live, Gavin.
Garen,
I'm sorry. The typo, the font was a little small for my eyes here. But I would say, one, he lives in your house, right? So they can buy him the stuff because like when my son was young, my dad, now Washington Commanders, but then he was a Washington Redskins fan where they still he tried to buy him a Redskins, blanket, and he would buy him these, Washington things. And it's like, okay, garage sale items right there. He lives in the house with you. So he needs to be there cheering with you, watching every Notre Dame football game and whatever other Notre Dame game it is, buy him the gear. If you live here in town, take him to Notre Dame events, and I guarantee you he'll get the Notre Dame fever, and it won't matter how much other USC garbage that the rest of the family buys him.
Just, start showing him the last 5 or 6 years Notre Dame USC games and put it on a loop, and just watch all the success that Notre Dame has. There was a 12-year span, I think, in the 80s and 90s where Notre Dame dominated USC. Just stay away from the mid-2000s, right? Other than that, you show them all that stuff. Just don't allow that music in there. Don't allow him to do the 2-finger thing. Like, just stay away from all that, man. You're the dad, man. Take that control.
That's right.
Take it.
You have the control. You need to use it. All right. With that said, Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Yes.
Let's do it. Fill in the blank. Justin Adamalola is eligible for a 6th season of eligibility next year. But he says despite being asked to return next season, he hasn't made a decision on what he's going to do after this season. And that's blank.
Smart. I think he's going to take all of the information, and I think he's going to make an educated decision. Personally, from a football standpoint, I think he needs to come back. I mean, I think he will go from being a non-starting role player this year to being a starter and the most experienced guy coming back on the defensive line next year. And it negates your issues at the Viper position if he comes back. So, I mean, from a Notre Dame standpoint, you want him back. He's obviously been invited. From a Justin situation, I think he should come back because I think it can only help him from a draft standpoint. But I also understand that this is senior day and he's going to be able to participate in senior day with his twin brother. And I get that. And you don't want to make a decision because if he makes a decision to come back, he's, by Marcus Freeman's new rules, he's not allowed to participate in senior day.
That's a good point. I wonder if that's playing into it.
I'm okay with it because of that. If that was the only reason that he hasn't made his decision yet, I'm okay with it because I would want to be out there with my actual brother and celebrate senior day with him.
Right. That makes a lot of sense from that aspect. And I hadn't thought about, but Marcus Freeman also said they have to have made a decision on their future. And if they, the guys, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to, because he basically drew that line in the sand and said 25 guys are going to be honored Saturday, and they are all guys with expiring eligibility, and they've all, already, have to be seniors, and they've made up their minds. So we're not going to have these guys getting honored 2 and 3 times on senior day like we've seen in the past.
To me, it felt like he was saying, though, if you are coming back, if you have decided to come back, then you are not participating. Like that's what it felt like to me, as opposed, because you don't want to put a gun to a kid's head and be like, we need to know right now.
Right.
Because that's going to shoot you. That's going to backfire if you do that.
See, what you said about, doing senior day with your twin brother, that makes a lot of sense, obviously. And if that's the reason, fine. But like what I looked at it initially, I hadn't really considered that side. To me, it seemed like a guy who maybe had, thinks of himself as a guy who has a chance to get drafted when really he probably doesn't have a chance to get drafted. I mean,
Right, I
he's
agree with
6'1",
that.
253, playing
Right.
defensive end, the number 2 defensive end, and he's only got 2.5 sacks or something like that. So
Yeah.
if he hasn't decided purely on a career standpoint, coming back would most benefit him because Isaiah Foskey will not be back, or at least we're pretty confident Isaiah Foskey is not going to be
Yes.
back, which
Yes.
de facto makes Justin number 1 at that position next year, which gives him a much better chance to improve his own draft status for the next year. So if it was purely on draft potential type stuff this year, I think it makes no sense at all. But if it's like what you're saying, go out there, go on senior day, be honored with your twin brother, and his family being here and the whole thing, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yep. And I just pulled this up because we're talking about senior day. Crystal says, just got here. Will Mayer be a part of senior festivities, or is it part you must be a senior and leaving?
Have to be a senior.
It's called senior day for a reason. So you're sorry, Michael Mayer. You are the best tight end ever to come to Notre Dame, but you're not a senior. So it is what it is.
He'll probably come back at some point in the future and be honored,
Sure.
But if you leave after your junior year, you can't be there on senior day.
And he should leave. I mean, we're not saying he should stick around. Yeah.
Do you buy or sell? Navy gave Boston College and USC a defensive blueprint for when they face Notre Dame.
To a degree. I mean, I agree with it to a degree because part of the problem with what Navy was doing to Notre Dame is Notre Dame, I mean, I hate to say it, I hate to use the words of Marcus Freeman. They didn't execute. Like they turned guys loose. They moved protections in the wrong way. There were, running backs had their worst game of picking up pressure in the pass game. There was just a lot of bad execution in that game. And even more so when I went back and watched it for the Upon Further Review show. If they just execute, if they just block the guys they're supposed to block, it's a completely different conversation that we're having about the second half of Navy. So if they can execute, then Boston College and USC can do whatever they want. It's not going to make a difference. But they have to execute that. They picked that stuff up against Clemson. They didn't pick it up against Navy. So we know they can do it, but they actually have to do it.
Right. You could say that, okay, they're going to blitz more. They're going to crowd the line of scrimmage more. I mean, anyone could have done that at any point. Like Stanford shut Notre Dame's running game down 5 weeks ago or whatever it's been now. That wasn't necessarily a blueprint for anybody afterwards. I just think that Navy's defense is so unique, the way they did things and the way they felt like they had to do things. Again, maybe you blitz a little bit more. Anyone has had the opportunity to put 7, 8 in the box at any point. And, they've tried it at different times this year. And it's really just a matter of, like you said, it comes down to whether Drew Pine specifically, if it comes to passing or the offensive line executes, that's what it comes down to me.
Yeah.
And, now, how is Tommy Rees? Because the other part of this is Tommy Rees has attacked each opponent a little bit differently, even though the game plans in general, there have been, some, just kind of ripping off, photocopying the game plan. There've been some of that, but there have been some tweaks along the way as well. Just, like how they attacked Clemson was not the way they tried to attack Navy, two different things. So, part of it's going to depend on that. Part of it's going to depend on, because the other part of it as well now is Drew Pine has had a week to work on some of that stuff, and Tommy Rees has had a week to work on some of that stuff with him. So how are they all going to respond?
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So, there could be some stuff they try to copy, but also
you should.
Every defensive coordinator, every defense is a little bit different. And I don't think most defensive coordinators aren't just going to drastically alter what they do defensively, whether, Navy or any other team had success or not. There might be some little pieces that they try to replicate, but I don't see them drastically altering their defenses to try to copy Navy, though.
Agreed.
Okay, so this is a question. I kind of teased this last week that came from someone posted on one of our YouTube videos in response to some stuff.
Okay.
I don't know if it was necessarily response, but he posted this. It was a question that he asked anyway. He says, so people are saying that if Notre Dame wins out, they could be in the top 12 in the rankings, college football playoff rankings. So if the college football playoff had a 12-team format, they could be in the playoff field. And if a team had a season like Notre Dame, like Notre Dame is currently having, and wins out, they ended up winning the national championship. Is that what really people want to see? Seems watered down to me. So what do you think of this, Vince? Does that seem watered down to you?
That's a good point, because that is the argument against doing the 12-team playoff, right? Is that you're going to get teams in there with 3 losses or more who now have an opportunity to win the national championship. Now, it's going to be a really tough road if you are, the 12 seed, for example, right? I mean, it would be the 11 seed, right? Because the 12 seed is going to go to that, most likely going to go to that group of 5 team, right? Unless they're really good and they happen to be ranked higher. Okay.
Right.
So, but if you're the 11 seed, you're still going on the road for the first round, and then you got to play a top 4 seed, right? So it would be a tough road to hoe in order to win the national championship. Could it be possible? Sure. I think that now you have into play all those underdog stories, and you have, all the things that bring eyeballs to TV. You have that going for you if you do this, and like a Notre Dame or somebody with 3 losses ends up running the table. Does it feel watered down? Maybe a little bit. But at the same time, if you're one of the best teams in the country and you can't hold your own water against a team with 3 losses, then maybe you don't deserve to be a national champion. So I'm for it. I just feel like, to be honest with you, and it could happen, I feel like those teams that maybe just skated in would end up losing anyway. I don't think that they would all the way make it, because there's usually a pretty good drop off from like the top 5 or 6 all the way down to 10, 11, 12. There's a good drop off there.
Sure.
So I think it would work itself out.
I'll use the NFL as an example, because I realize there are people who don't make my college football like the NFL and all that stuff. I get it. All right. It's the same sport, but they're 2 different sports, same sport, 2 different games. But at the same time, the NFL's had a much larger playoff field than college football, especially considering college football only went to a playoff format just a few years ago. So here's an 2 examples, same team that I'll give you. 2007 New York Giants, 10-6 in the regular season. Yeah. They were a wild card team, didn't win their own division. They make the playoffs. They go on a run. They beat the unbeaten New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. The team with Randy Moss, the first team to get to the Super Bowl without a loss, since the 1972 Miami Dolphins. 10-6, beats the undefeated team, Super Bowl champs for the rest of their lives. 2011, Giants are even worse. They're 9-7. Again, they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl champs for the rest of their lives. So, because of those 2 Super Bowls, Eli Manning's going to the Hall of Fame. If they don't go on those 2 runs as a 10-6 team and a 9-7 team that didn't win their own division, they are not, he's not going to the Hall of Fame, one, and they're not Super Bowl champs. And, so you've got an expanded playoff, and sometimes, I will be curious to see how it works in college, because there definitely has been greater disparity between the top of the rankings and teams like you're talking about, where you sit there in that 10, 11, 12 range, or, even 8, 9. There's been better disparity, but what you have to remember is teams 1 through 4 get a first round bye. And so you're going to get more evenly matched games in those first round games, so like nobody cares that North Carolina State was a 6 seed if you apply it to March Madness when they won it, March Madness in 83, or that Villanova was an 8 seed in 85. They're national champions. They got in and they play it out. And there are 131 FBS football teams in the country. So 4 teams is 3% of the teams making the playoffs. If you expand it to 12, that's still only 9%. It's still a very small amount of teams that are getting in. It's just the difference is we've only had a playoff for a few years. So it's just a concept, I think, for everybody to grasp when it comes to who's involved in the playoff and how many teams and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think it makes it any worse.
Yeah.
I think it makes it even more exciting if like an 11 or 12 would at least get to a national championship game.
And that is the point, I think, because I'm sorry, there's not much better than playoff football in the NFL. And I don't think college is going to be that far behind as far as the excitement level to watch some of these games. I think it's going to be pretty stinking exciting to watch some of these games and to kind of follow teams and see upsets and all that. And if a team like a Notre Dame, for example, and you get in with 3 losses, you're going to be in the 10-11 range, right? So that means you have to beat the 6 seed. Then you probably have to beat the 2 seed. And then you're going to have to beat the 1 seed.
Right.
If you do that,
it's going to take a lot.
You deserve to be the national champs, man, because you beat all the teams that probably thought that they were going to be national champions. So I'm okay with it. I think it makes for a great story. I think it makes for great football. I think it could be a lot of fun. Now, I also think there's going to be a pretty good amount of blowouts in the playoffs at the college level. I think you're going to see some blowouts, but that's going to come with it because the drop-off is going to be greater in college than it is in the NFL.
I still think that like the first round games are going to be more I'm more interested in first round games. Like here's what ESPN every week has done the projection. If there was a 12-team format this year, number 12 would be Central Florida versus number 5 Michigan, number 11 Penn State at number 6 Tennessee, number 10 Utah at number 7 LSU, number 9 Clemson at number 8 Alabama. And like those matchups aren't, like a completely compelling case. Like when I think of like how some of those could turn out, but at the same time, it's still an Alabama team that's down and you'd get Alabama Clemson in the first round. Like I would still be more interested in those as opposed to
some of the bowl
just
matchups.
A bunch of basically bowl games
that don't mean anything.
Exhibition games that are meaningless.
And I will also say that you're going to see less opting out if a team is in the playoff.
Yes.
And so
much less opting out.
If let's say you've got Alabama Clemson in a bowl game this year, right? Because they're not going to make, let's say neither one of them make the playoff, which I think is a pretty solid bet at this point. So let's say that they match up in one of these bowl games. You know how many guys are going to opt out of that game?
Right.
It's gonna be a terrible game because you're gonna have a bunch of guys who haven't played all year. They're gonna be playing in that game. If you're in the playoff and you still have a shot at a national championship, that game is a completely different scenario.
Right. All right, got to keep it moving here because I've only got a few more minutes. USC's number 7 in this week's playoff rankings. If the Trojans run the table against Notre Dame, UCLA, and then the Pac-12 championship game, do you buy or sell them getting into the playoff?
They've got a shot just because of where they are right now, right? They've got a shot. A lot of stuff is going to have to shake their way. I think Oregon losing hurt them big time as far as strength of schedule is going to be once you get through the Pac-12 championship, because I think
they needed a better
be those two. I think you need a better matchup there. At TCU is going to have to lose, I think, at some point, right, in order to kind of open up that area. Because I think if TCU loses, I think they're probably out. But you're going to have some teams above you mess up. But they're going to need a lot of help. But it was not out of the realm of possibility if they do it, because their one loss is to Utah by 1 point. You can explain that away, to be honest. So they're going to have one of the better losses of the one-loss teams if you're starting to compare resumes on one-loss teams.
Yeah, and and again, the question is what's going to happen with the teams in front of them. But just the fact that they're sitting at number 7 means they're in really good position.
Absolutely.
Like again, like we were talking about 2-loss LSU earlier, sitting there where LSU is sitting right now at number 6.
Okay. So
the committee obviously likes LSU better than USC. So if they both run the table, LSU's getting in over USC. Because they'd have a win over Georgia at that point.
Strongly disagree with that decision. I would strongly
You can disagree with it, but they'll also have a win over Georgia. So they're going to get in.
They got blowout loss. They got blowout loss to Tennessee.
Right.
I know. Blowout loss.
I know.
So,
but the other thing is Tennessee is still sitting in front of them, and then what do you do? This is what we talked about last week, I think. What do you do with Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU? Because then you've got head-to-head wins against each other.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to get really interesting, but the committee obviously
it could be a fun debate. I just think that if USC ends up winning out, they still have one loss. LSU has 2 losses, and one of those losses is an absolute shellacking by Tennessee. So I would take If you just have the resume, you don't have the team name. This isn't BK bashing, although it's one of my pastimes. I enjoy it, but I still think just from a resume standpoint, I would put USC in over.
I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about Jim Mora for Coach of the Year right now with what he's done at UConn, but
don't say it. Do not say it.
But your boy is like,
you can't be Coach of the Year if you lose to Florida State and Tennessee the way they did. You can't. Sorry.
No, I disagree with that because their roster. I know you don't like him, but their roster was a bleep show last year, and for them to even be sitting where they are right now, I don't care if you lose to Florida State, because as we said before the season started, that they were going to probably be in the 6-6, 7-5 range, and instead they're in college football playoff conversation.
They are. And I give them credit for that.
You can lose to Florida State and be Coach of the Year based on what he inherited last year.
Negative. Sorry. Negative ghostwriter. Sorry. Not with the way your special teams have imploded in that game against Florida State. You hired that guy. You're not Coach of the Year. Sorry.
All right, final question tonight. There have been a lot of takes on the Jeff Saturday interim hiring. We talked about some of them earlier this week. Former Steelers head coach Bill Cowher, who's on CBS, said that the Saturday hiring was a, quote, disgrace to the coaching profession, end quote. So Chris Mad Dog Russo goes on Sirius XM radio. His response to Cowher was basically that Cowher got to skip right into national TV with no prior TV experience. So what's the difference with Jeff Saturday? What do you think about that rationale?
I think that's absolutely 100% accurate. That's what I think, because neither of those two people had to work their way up. Now, in the TV industry, right, the analyst industry, we see it all the time with former coaches and former players. They automatically get the boost to those spots, right? So it's more common. Doesn't make it right, but it is more common than it is in the coaching
world. The bigger the name, the bigger opportunity you've got.
Absolutely.
Tom Brady's got a contract and he hasn't even done, he's not even done playing football yet.
You don't know if he's any good at.
He's got the biggest contract anyone's ever had.
Right, exactly. You have no idea if he's any good at it, right?
Right.
But you know what it all comes down to? Any profession that you have ever had, or I have ever had, or anybody in the chat has ever had, it comes down to this. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And Jeff Saturday is really good friends with Jim Irsay. And, Jim Irsay really respects Jeff Saturday. And so he made him the head coach. It only takes one, like you said, right? Only takes one owner to make you the head coach.
That's right.
That's who he knows. And that's why he got the job, period.
Yep.
And he may be good at it, but that's why he got it.
Life's not about what's fair. It's about what's feasible. Like someone I used to work with used to talk about fair all the time. Quit talking about what's fair, because nothing is fair. It's like fairness went out the window a long time ago. But there is, like being in the profession that I'm in, having worked in broadcasting and, this, profession for a long time. This goes back to when I was in college in the mid 90s. I had a professor who called it the jockocracy of like the guys who would leave the playing field and go straight into the booth. And it's like, again, it's been going on forever, and it's never been necessarily fair to like, the guys who sit on the play-by-play side and, who start out at low levels and cut their teeth, unless your name's Jack Collinsworth, I guess, and like rise through the ranks and all that kind of stuff. But, again, it's like he is where he is because of what his name is and because of where he went to school. He's a Notre Dame grad whose last name is Collinsworth. His brother played for Notre Dame, and his dad obviously has been on NBC for a long time.
It's not who you know. It's what you know. I mean, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's a prime example. Jeff Saturday's a prime example. And any other athlete or coach that has gotten big ticket numbers after getting fired, by the way, usually getting fired or retiring. I mean, that's how it is because of who they are. So, and I mean, even Tony Romo, like he ended up being really good at the job. But why did he get the job? Because he was an ex-quarterback.
And an ex-Dallas Cowboys quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And it worked out really well because he's really good at his job.
Right.
They didn't know that when they hired him.
Right. They can say they did all they want, but
you can do all the screen tests you want.
You don't know until that mic and that camera are live.
Yeah.
So that's why, I'm still I am curious to see what how this whole thing works out with Tom Brady, because
Oh,
not
yeah.
only is he getting the job, he's going straight to the number one booth, right off the top,
Yep.
without doing a game. And they tried that with Jason Witten on Monday Night Football a few years ago, basically trying to follow the momentum of Tony Romo, but it didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
Vince, I've got to get going.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, I got to pack up and hit the bus. Good to be with you here as always. Thanks to everybody for being in the mailbag here tonight. But I mean, people keep wanting to bring up Jesse, like this job is paying anywhere close to like
I know, right?
What's sitting on CBS or Jeff Saturday's making down there in Indy.
I can guarantee you he's not making Jeff Saturday money.
No. Oh, and he slips in a super chat right before we go. Just saying hi, guys. Great job tonight. No question. Just saying hi. All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you very much, Joe.
Appreciate it.
Again, I got to get out of here. I got to break it all down. Great to be. Jesse will be back tomorrow. I have no idea what we're talking about. I'm sure Boston College will factor into it. We'll figure it out.
Have a great call, my friend.
All right. Thank you, sir. Talk to you later.